But I'm interested in like your guys' like thoughts or just like your reaction to this, because when I spilled the drink, it ended up damaging about 10 cards from a card game that I was working on about 12 years ago. When I lived in my very first apartment, I was working on a card game that was sort of loosely based on Steve Jackson's Illuminati. If anyone gets that reference at all, Steve Jackson's Illuminati was a card game that came out around the same time as Magic, the mid 90s. And you would basically pick like a group that runs the world or whatever. They didn't get too risque with that, so don't worry. But you basically pick like a group that runs the world. And then you would play like organizations and personalities and different like one-time effect cards to basically gain like power. And then like the first person to hit a certain power number, I think like wins, or something. The first person to complete their board or something like that. I forget the exact win condition for Steve Jackson's Illuminati, but it was a game that I collected a little bit off and on for about 3 years during the 90s, and I always really enjoyed it. So there's an oldie. Wow, Illuminati card's been a minute. Okay, so there's a couple of people here. Who know what I'm talking about. I had a shoebox. Nice. I would actually love to get my hands on some of these, but last I checked, you go on like eBay or whatever, and they're relatively expensive. So kind of tough nowadays. Especially, I feel like they were printed in like somewhat limited supply. So I had basically started a game kind of a lot like this. You pick like a faction at the beginning of the game. Whether it be a government or like a large scale organization or something like that. And you start with that like in the middle of your board. And then there's this sort of, I think I called it the tentacle system or something like that. There's this sort of like ladder, a pyramid structure from the top to the bottom. And your bottom has more, I guess we'll put this in Pokemon terms. The bottom has more bench slots and the top has fewer bench slots. And the cards that you play in each row, right, are granted different benefits or no benefits depending on which row that they're in. But obviously you have more room to play cards in your bottom row. You have less room to play cards in your top row. So you want to play your really good cards in the top row and give them the best benefits or the most synergy or whatever, right, is the way that system worked. Now, the actual idea behind the game is to build 500 influence. And whoever gets to 500 influence first rules the world, wins the game, whatever. And the way you build influence is by playing personalities and organizations, and again, one-time use cards. It's, again, a little bit like Steve Jackson's Illuminati, to be quite honest. If I ever put this game out, he could probably sue me because this stream exists, right? So if I ever was sent a cease and desist by Steve Jackson, I would definitely have to obey that. But if anything, I just want to print this game like for my own and a couple of other people's pleasure, right? But yeah, the idea is that you play like personalities and organizations which cost money, and money is like mana. You start off with a certain amount of money in your bank, and then sometimes organizations and personalities and one-time use like spells or whatever will generate more money for you, right? So like there's a dark ritual somewhere in here, and I forget what it's called, but it's, you spend $2, you get $5, basically. Some personalities, because like they're entertainment personalities, they will give you certain monetary bonuses like every single turn that go into your bank. And then you can use that money to play more cards, and your personalities, your organizations will also not only generate bank during your opener, your beginning of your turn, but they will also generate influence during your turn. The influence you generate is like static, like you don't generate more influence every turn. It's just that like once you hit 500, you win the game, if that makes any sense. So there's a bunch of cards that like, I'm a personality. You can play me attached to row 3 or whatever, tentacle 3, you know what I mean? But I have an enter the battlefield trigger basically that gives all your personalities double influence until the end of the turn. So there's a bunch of like until end of turn cards, but those are basically in the deck or in the game to make sure that you can have like turns where you win the game. You know what I mean? Like OTK turns basically is how you're going to win the game, by snowballing for the first like 5 turns and then having this one big turn where you play like 6 cards because you have all this money, right? Or like ways to draw extra cards is how this works. And of course there's interaction in the game. There's ways to blow up your opponent's organizations or personalities, or like there are counter spells in this game. I did make one of those. and just basic removal spells and stuff like that. So, you know, I lost a lot of them, but I've still got a small stack of them right here, you know. So declassified files is $4. Search your deck for a card, put it in your hand, shuffle your deck. So $4 for a demonic tutor, right? Bailout is $1. You add $5 to your bank. There's a demonic tutor, right? So prescription medication, that's a thing that like an organization would use to help rule the world, right? It's $3. Draw a card for each organization you control. However, those organizations produce $1 less than usual during your next bank step. So you see how this game works, right? Like, now I've got a bunch of like, I've got a bunch of like copies of those cards because you can play up to 3 of any card in your deck per these rules. Fluoridation, $2. You draw a card, your opponent discards a card. Commercials, $3. This is just a one-time use card. Add $2 to your bank for each entertainment organization you control. So you see organizations and personalities have different types like creatures and magic, right? And then retro revival, $4. Take target entertainment personality or organization from the discard pile, put it into your hand. So a reanimation spell or a raise dead kind of thing. So that's the basic gist of this game. And, you know, I'm actually thinking about like taking some time and like printing this thing out, you know, maybe sending it to a few patrons or something for free. Cause you know, I don't know that I can sell this in the current like iteration that it is in my head. Right. So I'm thinking about sending it to like a few people, you know, maybe like Discord, like Kane and Cat Lady and a couple of other people, that are really active in Discord, and like, you know, see what we can do. But this would be like a year down the road, you know, it'd take a lot of preparation. So I don't know, just seeing them again, like made me want to do it again. So don't be surprised if I talk about it off and on from time to time.